book community tends to celebrate DNFing, but have we swung too far now? Lately, I've been thinking that perhaps as a reading community, we're now DNFing too many books. And if you don't know what DNF stands for, it stands for did not finish, as in I put the book down and didn't complete it. So today we're going to talk about DNFing, why it's become so normalised, what it says about our relationship with literature, and whether you should rate and review a book that you didn't actually finish. There's definitely been a cultural shift when it comes to DNFing. It seems like 10 years ago or so, there was a lot more guilt around it and people felt like they really should finish what they'd picked up. Whereas now, from looking at comments on videos and on Reddit and just on bookish spaces in general, it seems as though it's not just accepted but really encouraged to DNF books. There's a lot of only read what you enjoy, protect your peace, life's too short, which does make sense because it frees up your time. And if you're reading as a hobby, if you're reading because you want to enjoy yourself and relax and you're not getting that from your book, then why continue? Especially because we've all got such long TBRs that it feels like a waste of time to put more time into a book that we are just not enjoying and we just don't feel like we're getting enough out of. These are definitely things that I've said before, and I do DNF books, so please don't think that I don't do it myself, because I do, and I will get into that. My concern is, have we gone too far the other way? Have we gone from feeling guilty putting down books that we don't enjoy to putting things down really quickly if they're not giving us sort of an instant gratification? I think when everything we consume is expected to entertain us instantly, then books that are slower or with a more delayed payoff just don't get a fair chance. Some stories are meant to unfold gradually and to be searched for meaning, and yet I see so many comments and so many reviews where people just say like, it didn't hook me straight away, so I put it down. What really interested me in the comments though was there was a really common thread occurring in this sort of pros of DNFing. Comments like, I stopped reading a book as soon as it stops being enjoyable. It's supposed to be fun, not a job. About 80% of the books I start, if I'm not having fun, I put the book down right away. And the one job a book has is to be interesting, and if it fails at that, it's not your fault. What I notice about these is there's a lot of emphasis being placed on fun, and that it's the book's job to hold your attention. And as that one comment said, a book's one job is to be interesting. But I don't think that that's true. I think it definitely can be part of a book's job, but it's not the only thing that a book might be trying to achieve. Now, obviously, fun and enjoyment is a perfectly valid reason to read, and I think, most of us are going to read at least on some level for fun and enjoyment, like I know I do. However, we also read for a plethora of other reasons, such as exploring a new writing style, or looking at a new philosophical idea, or exploring a book because of the time period that it was written in and wanting to know more about the history. It could be to try and see the world through a different lens. There's really a multitude of reasons why we read. And what I really want to talk about is our avoidance of boredom. I think these days we are so desperate to avoid boredom at all costs, and sometimes if a book has a little bit of a lull, the pacing slows a little bit, people are very quick to put that book down. And don't be wrong, by people, I include myself, I'm people, I put books down for this reason as well. Because let's face it, we are a generation of people who can no longer sit on the loo or stand in a queue, unintentional rhyme, without a phone in our hands, and we are watching YouTube videos whilst we are scrolling looking for the next one, and we are speeding up people who are talking at perfectly normal speeds. We are going on there and going, 1.5, because I can't stand to listen to someone at a regular speed anymore because I need the constant stimulation. It just doesn't bode well for us, not just as readers but as humans. It's like we are training ourselves to expect this constant stimulation, and if we don't get it, we click off, we disengage, we put the book down, and we just move on. Maybe this sounds a little bit dramatic, but I think it's part of the wider throwaway culture that we as a society have created, one that prizes instant gratification and hyper-individualism over things like depth and curiosity. And I say this as someone who has swung both ways accidental bisexual joke. I have gone from not DNFing books at all. I'm definitely a completionist at heart. Then I kind of swung the other way, and I think I was getting into a state where if I wasn't instantly really getting into the book, then I was putting that book down. And I noticed myself just doing it to more and more books, and I started to think, I think I've gone a little bit too far, because I'm not just putting down books more, I am doing the things that I just said. I am speeding up videos, I am trying to do one thing whilst I am trying to do something else and doing them both poorly. I am watching the TV whilst I am scrolling on my phone. I am looking for, more videos while I am watching a video. And I'm watching that video on 1.25 speed. And it's like I can feel my attention span just shrinking. And look, I'm already diagnosed with ADHD. And it feels as though I am actively feeding the part of my brain that demands that novelty all the time, when I really should be focusing on training it to not demand that constant stimulation. And don't be wrong, obviously I'm always going to have ADHD, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's something I very much accept about myself, but I don't want to make it feel worse than it is. Like, I don't want to give myself, I don't know how to put this. Sometimes it's like I make myself feel more symptomatic. I think I'm doing a bad job of explaining this now. I think whether you have ADHD or not, a lot of us are really struggling with attention spans and with this constant dopamine seeking and demanding these constant stimulation. So I have been making a real effort just to slow down, not just in my reading life, but in all areas of my life. And I've done this pretty successfully in the past and then kind of gone off track, and now I'm trying to get back on track with it again. Anything that can make my brain quiet down just a smidge is definitely worth doing. I am practicing slowing down, I'm practicing taking longer on books, I am trying not to read so many books all at once, I'm trying to give myself a chance to really get into the book, and I'm trying to let in a little bit of boredom. I'm trying to see boredom now not as something to escape, but something to allow in, because, being bored is what makes me the most creative. When I think back to when I was a kid, I would spend quite a while just daydreaming, lost in my own world, lying on grass, looking at the clouds, or lying in my bed, staring out the window, and I would have some of my best ideas then. And it's also something that helps my brain to feel a little bit calmer. It's like it needs chance to just go off on one. And I think letting this boredom in, it would be beneficial for a lot of us. So I'm really trying to tolerate the boredom in my reading life and in my personal life as a whole, in the same way that I am trying to improve my anxiety by trying to practice tolerating uncertainty, in the same way that I have really helped my OCD by practicing exposure therapy. And I kind of see it a little bit like that. I feel like I need to expose myself to being bored more often and to just slow down. I think sometimes the best parts of life and of reading, they happen in the quieter moments, and they happen when we just really take our time and we really just enjoy the quiet and enjoy the peace. And yeah, I do get the argument very much of life is short and read what you enjoy, don't get me wrong, and I do partially agree with that. I mean, yeah, it's one of those things, I do agree with that, but I think we can also take it too far, because yes, life is short, but it's nowhere near as short as my attention span. One of the things I noticed as well when I was doing some research for this video was the amount of people who ended up loving books that they initially DNF'd. And I thought that was so interesting. This has definitely happened to me as well. I remember when I was younger, I mean way younger, I think I was about 15 or 16, and my boyfriend at the time, his favourite book was War and Peace. And he had multiple copies of it in his room, and I picked it up one day and I read, I think literally the first 3 chapters and I put it down and I just thought, this isn't for me. I had no interest in continuing it. However, I read it again several years ago and absolutely loved it. It's definitely one of the best books that I've read, and it's definitely a 5-star read for me. I just absolutely love it, and I have all of the translations now. But it's previously a book that I have DNF'd. You know, people change, and as we change, so does our perception and so do our tastes. And something that we initially didn't enjoy or perhaps found hard to read can just click with us at a different moment in time. Plus, you know, I think some books are just an acquired taste. Like, you have to almost settle into their rhythm to be able to actually appreciate them. And you know what? I've been told that I'm an acquired taste, believe it or not. I've been told it. A couple of people in my life have told me that I'm an acquired taste. And I tend to agree. You know, I think if you don't like me, you should acquire some taste. Just laughing at my own joke. Anyway, as an example, I've just saved a few comments that I found from people who DNF'd books and ended up loving them. So we had someone who attempted a Stephen King book called The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon, which I've never read, or to be honest, I've never even heard of this Stephen King book. But then I'm not exactly a big Stephen King fan, so that makes sense. Anyway, they said they found it quite boring and were close to DNFing it at multiple points, but they ended up giving it 5 stars. Someone said they took a few months break from the Count of Monte Cristo and then came back to it and ended up really enjoying it. There was also someone who said they ended up loving The Lord of the Rings, but not until they'd read 200 pages, and I've read Lord of the Rings and it was definitely the same for me. And yet a lot of the times we see people DNFing really early on. Someone else who said they DNF'd And Then There Were None by Agatha Christie before going back to it and ending up really enjoying it. I love that book. I can't imagine putting that book down. I think that book is gripping from the start, to be honest. But you know, this just shows we are all different. Not everything will grip us in the same way at the same points in our lives. Someone else said Anna Karenina and they put it down 3 times before they finished it and now it's one of their favourites, and I agree. I adore Anna Karenina. The one that really got me was The Memory Police. Someone said about the middle being quite slow and the plot predictable, which I kind of disagree with, but anyway, that's their opinion. And the end was profoundly heartbreaking and they gave it 10 out of 10. I loved seeing this one. I absolutely love The Memory Police, and I've looked on the Goodreads review for this and it is massively underrated, and there are people on there who have DNF'd this book at the beginning and rated it, or in the middle and rated it, and this is one of those books when I'm like, you didn't read the ending. It's genuinely got one of the most shocking, haunting, thought-provoking endings that I've ever read. I mean, when I read it, it was genuinely like a jaw-dropping ending, which I think I captured on a vlog, amazingly. And yeah, when I see reviews on that and they didn't make it to the end, I'm like, no, you don't know what you missed out on. And yeah, it just made me think, I wonder how many amazing literary experiences we miss out on because we just give up too soon, and I'm sure I've done it myself with some books. So this leads me on to, should you rate a book that you have DNF'd? There is such disagreement on this one. I've seen so many comments. I've seen some people who really don't think that you should because, you know, you've missed out on the ending, and like a bit like I said in Memory Police, perhaps it had a brilliant ending. Although, is that enough to really pull the book up? It probably depends on your perspective on how good that ending was. And some people think it depends how far you got in the book, so they might say it's not fair to rate a book that you DNF'd after 10%, after 20%, but it is fair if you DNF'd it after 60 or 70%, or it might depend on the length of the book. You know, obviously, if a book's 100 pages and if a book's 1,000 pages, then 20% is much more of the way into the book. Other people, they said that they want people to rate it even if they put it down after like 3 pages because they want to know what made them put that book down, and that's good information to them. I can definitely see both sides because I do think it can be really useful information, and I think it's a shame that on platforms like Goodreads there isn't actually a place that you can mark it as DNF. Maybe if you could select DNF and then the percentage that you'd read, that would be really helpful. I do have a shelf of DNFs on my Goodreads, although I'm not very good at keeping it up to date. There's no separation, so you can't separate out people who finished it from people who didn't, and that might be helpful. I do think it could be helpful to see because sometimes people have put the book down for the same reason. Now, for me, I would say it just depends. Like, I will sometimes rate a book that I DNF'd. Normally, it's when I've gotten the majority of the way through it though. So if I've read 60% of that book, I might still rate it because I feel like I've taken in enough information that I'm able to still give a review, and obviously in that review I'm going to state clearly where I read up to. And I kind of think whether you give a star rating or not, it's pretty irrelevant. Like if I say I thought the writing was poor, then whether I put the star review or not, I'm giving a pretty clear indication of my thoughts either way. However, if I put a book down pretty early, I will tend to I will mark it as DNF, and I might, you know, come on a wrap up and say I DNF'd it and why, but I'm unlikely to give it a star rating just because I DNF'd it quite early on. There is exceptions to this. If I found something to be, this doesn't happen much, but say it was like highly offensive in some way, then I would probably still rate it and explain why. Although I do think that this is also a double-edged sword, because sometimes when you find something offensive personally, it's a good call again to step back and think, oh, why is that making me feel uncomfortable? Is it actually a problem with the book? Is it something that's triggered something within me? And that can be quite an interesting self-reflection as well. Now, I don't have really strong opinions on this, to be honest. I don't really care if you rate the book and you only read, you know, 20%. There are exceptions, like, don't be wrong, like I say a book like I love, like, you know, Memory Police, and with that amazing ending, and you didn't read it and then you rated, oh god, this happened with another book actually. I'm saying this, I'm like, I'm really not that bothered, and then I'm like, is that true? Because I also saw someone rate The Everlasting by Alex E. Harrow, and I think they said they'd read about 15-20% of it, I can't remember the exact number now, and they basically said that they DNF'd it because there wasn't enough banter. And this isn't like a romantasy or anything like that. It's more of a political fantasy. And I was just like, no, this is a book that you really need to read more than that, because it just gets so good. And seeing reviews from people who put it down at like 10, 15, 20% and then rated it 1 or 2 stars, and it's one of the best books I've read this year. And obviously that's, you know, it's a very personal thing, but it did make me think, you haven't read enough of this to be able to assess it. So I suppose I do lean a little bit more towards that side, but equally, you do you. If you want to rate books at that, then go ahead. I think as long as you're saying, I put it down at 10%, it is fair enough, because we can all see and assess for ourselves then. I think my stance overall with DNFing is that DNFing can be a really powerful tool, and I'm certainly not against it. I do agree with some of those sentiments that, you know, I've got so many books on my TBR and life is short, and I do want to read books that I enjoy and that I'm going to find impactful. However, sometimes a little more perseverance is needed, and especially depending on the type of book. I think if the book is one that you think is supposed to be read a little bit slower, and this is often the case with classics or certain literary fiction books, like perseverance can lead to deeper reading. But I guess it depends on what you're trying to get out of the book. And like I said, I have finished books and then wished I'd DNF'd them, including some very popular ones. We're all reading for different reasons at different times in our lives. Sometimes I am picking up a book purely for enjoyment, or maybe I want a palate cleanser or a cozy read, and if something isn't serving that, then I'm probably going to put it down. There are definitely times when I will DNF a book in what I think of as a sort of self-protection, like to protect my mental health, and that's normally if something is triggering to me. I will say that I've kind of worked on myself quite a lot and gone to a lot of therapy, so there is a lot of things that aren't as triggering as they once were, so this doesn't happen as much now. But several years ago I was definitely putting more things down for this reason. I used to avoid any book with even the mention of pregnancy loss, fertility as an example, whereas I don't now, but there are certain things like that can still make me feel a bit uncomfortable. And there's also been times when I've DNF'd a book because it has upset me or even disgusted me. However, there's also been times when I've had that reaction and felt initially like almost angry with the book, to be honest. And then I've kind of reflected on it and asked myself why that is, why am I uncomfortable? And I think that's really valuable as well. And sometimes just having that experience can be valuable, and it can make us learn something new about ourselves. So I do appreciate it for that, as much as I don't want my books to anger me and gross me out all the time. Overall, I am trying to persevere a little more. I am still going to be DNFing books, but I am trying to achieve a nice balance, and I'm also trying to focus on being careful with what I read so that I'm not picking up things that I don't think I'll enjoy in the first place. And when I'm reading something that I think is meant to be read slower or in a more analytical way, then I'm persevering with it, and if a bit of boredom creeps in, I'm just sitting with it. I would love to hear from you. What's your take on DNFing? What's the last book you DNF'd? Has there ever been a book that you've put down, gone back to, and then absolutely loved? And do you think that we do sometimes DNF a little bit too much, or do you disagree with everything I've said here and you think that no, I think we should just, it doesn't matter what it is, you know, whether it's a classic or literary fiction or romantasy or whatever, like whatever the genre is, if you're not enjoying it, put it down. Mine is just one take, okay? I'm not saying that I have the right answer here. This is just something I've been thinking about, so I would love to hear your thoughts. Thank you so much for watching, and please do consider liking and subscribing if you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you soon. Bye!